everyone, and welcome to our next edition of Wonder Woman Wednesdays, where we get to know a woman from somewhere in the world to understand what makes her tick, how she makes the world a better place, what her journey was, and basically celebrate her and support her. So today, my guest is Emma Brooke Gilding. Hello.
Hi. Hi.
And I am in Chicago right now. Emma, where are you joining us from?
I'm currently in North Wales in the UK.
Cool.
In the middle of nowhere.
I was going to ask, because you say currently, I know that you're a bit of a nomad.
Yeah, so I for the last few years I've traveled on and off, and then probably the last year I was traveling pretty much. I would say not traveling in the sense of people get this image of like moving every day, but I have a camper van and I love to travel abroad as well. So I spent last summer in a different part of the UK in my van by the beach, working from there, and then I spent a couple of months in Portugal, came back to Wales for Christmas, and then went out to Bali for a couple of months, and then came back right at lockdown. So now I've been here a little bit longer than planned. I was planning on going back down to Cornwall in my van back in April, but it looks like maybe, fingers crossed, I'll be doing that next week.
Cool. I'm very jealous no matter what, because it sounds pretty fabulous. And also sounds like, I don't know, a little unnerving, to be honest, because I like my home comforts. Do you miss those when you travel?
Not as much as I thought I would. I have two very sort of different sides, because I really like stability, but I really like freedom. So I think I'm probably a bit of a minimalist. I don't like having the kind of responsibility of a lot of stuff or a house that I'm renting. I mean, I have a house, but it's rented out and has been for quite a few years, because I feel too much like tied down too much otherwise. So I think the way that I travel, and also because I work online, it's important for me to feel quite settled wherever I am. So I mean, in my van is my home, so kind of wherever I go in that, I still have my home and my things, and I know where everything is. And when I'm traveling abroad, I tend to not travel around too much. I like to get to one place and get to know it, and make friends there, and get to know, where I want to go and where I want to surf. Yeah. And also so that I can figure out where the best place is to work for my clients, because it's really important. I work as a counselor and a coach, so I can't be in a hotel room with like thin walls and people hearing what I'm talking about and that sort of thing. So it takes a little bit more planning, so I can't just move every day.
Did you just say where I surf?
Yes. Well, I say I surf really, really badly, but it is something I really enjoy, which is why most of the places I go, I can surf. In the UK, it's really cold, obviously, but that's why I like to go abroad to more hot countries, really, preferably with warm water. So I've spent about 2 or 3 months in Sri Lanka the year before last, and that was really beautiful as well. So yeah, I do love the warm water.
That's pretty cool. I went surfing all of once in Australia, I think 3rd week of when I moved there. And I stood up, got a crap load of salty water and sunscreen in my eyes, and decided, you know what? I did the thing. I'm going to be on the beach with the beer. See you later. So yeah, anyway, respect. Yeah.
It's a very interesting hobby, I guess, because it really teaches you so much about yourself, surfing. But from a coaching perspective, it really hits all your triggers, it makes you question yourself, and I think that's kind of what I like about it. I have a very love-hate relationship with it, but it's very humbling, and it's very interesting like I said, I'm still a complete beginner, and I've been surfing for a few years now, so it's not something that comes naturally at all, but I do enjoy it. So
Mm.
I try and put myself in a place where I can surf so that I have no excuse not to.
It's like literally finding balance. Get it?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, definitely.
That's gonna be as good as I'm gonna get today. Okay, it's been a long. We're recording this actually on a Friday, and it's been a long month this week.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, so let's rewind. Okay, I did
Mm.
jump into traveling because it's so cool. But let's figure out, how did you get to be able to live kind of for as long as you want, where you want, with your puppers, who I'm told might make a surprise cameo. You might see my cat
Yeah.
or a dog or a creature walking by. Yeah, what did you study, and like, what is your career like? How did you get to where you
Um,
are?
yeah,
And what are
I
you?
never anticipated being here, which I think is true for a lot of people. And that's kind of nice. I like that you never really know how the dots join until you look back. Um, but yeah, so I'm a counselor and trainee coach. I did a little bit of training in coaching for counselors before I joined Cocharia, and I'm just coming to the end of my ACC with Cocharia now. And I work online. I've always worked online. That's not a COVID thing. It was kind of my plan when I started retraining to work online. Although I did work face to face for about a year or two, like did both before I transitioned. But yeah, so I did HR at uni. It was a bit of a compromise with my parents because they wanted me to do business and I really loved psychology. So we kind of hit this middle ground of doing psychology for organizations. Um, and I actually really loved it. And then I graduated university and I ended up, my parents have their own business importing fruit from like all over the world and then selling to supermarkets, wholesalers in the UK. So it was always kind of the plan that I would join the family business, which I did, and I worked with them for 5 years. So I had a really broad range of experience. So I was doing the HR for them, but I was also working in a commercial capacity. So I started off in the fridges, QCing all the fruit, like checking the quality of the fruit and getting to know the product and that sort of thing. And then I moved in and started working with suppliers and supermarkets and doing the logistics and the transport and the duty and the buying and the selling and the pricing and all that sort of stuff. So I got a really good commercial training, I guess. And then the last year I ended up going out to Italy and working with one of our agencies over there for a year, which was amazing. Again, learning the other side of the business, so kind of the growing side, how it worked from that aspect. But at that point, I kind of knew that there wasn't a home for me long term. I just wasn't interested in that commercial side of things. I really wanted to do counselling. I'd had a little bit of a kind of mental health crisis in my early 20s where I'd gone to see a counsellor and they really like saved my life completely. So I knew that was where I wanted to go. So I did some research. I signed up for a 3-year diploma. I'd sort of done like certificates in counselling and stuff. I'd done my yoga teacher training. I'd done mindfulness training. I'd done lots of things to try and tick that box of the psychology and helping people. And I was really interested in yoga anyway, but nothing really fitted. So I was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to do this 3-year course. And I really didn't want to go back to school, but I was like, I have to do it. Nothing else is going to work. So I signed up, and it coincided with us moving back from Italy. And my boyfriend at the time was like, if we're moving back from Italy, I'm going to have to move to London. It's kind of the middle of the recession. There are no jobs where we were living. So he was like, you can come or you can not come. It's up to you. And I was like, well, okay, like let's move to London. So I had no desire to ever have live in London. It just wasn't my thing. I wasn't a city person. But I started looking for HR jobs. I ended up really randomly in this corporate reception management concierge service, like outsourced service. So a lot of the city and the finance districts, you know, all those companies and buildings in those areas would outsource their reception services and their concierge services. And I ended up being a reception manager for an insurance company for like a year and a half for them, doing like line management, people management, working with really unproductive teams and like coaching them and bringing them on, all the while training in my counseling on the side. Then I ended up in operations management with the same company, had to take a year out from my counseling course because it was just way too big a job. And I really loved that. It was super high pressure. Like in the operations team, we were making sure that like 500 receptionists got to work on time. And if they didn't, we had a team of 100 mobile receptionists that they were cross-trained on different buildings. So we had to, my team would get in at like 6 in the morning and I would get in a little bit later, and we had to basically do this big jigsaw puzzle of getting them all to the right places in the right times for their right shifts. Actually really like, it was like a really big puzzle that was fun, and
To me it sounds like a nightmare.
Stressful. It was super stressful, but it was so much fun. And again, I've been brought in because the team was seen to be underperforming, but actually it turned out they were just really under-resourced and didn't have any kind of management structure in place to understand what was going on. So I had this really great experience in London, but all the while I was training for my counselling, and you knew that the day was going to come that I was going to have to leave, which I did when I finished my counselling. And from there, I don't know, I hadn't really thought about what I wanted my life to look like. But as I started researching working as a counsellor and realising that in the UK, there wasn't really much of a scope to be an employed counsellor. We have a National Health Service here, so there are counsellors employed in the National Health Service, but they're few and far between. It is becoming a bigger thing. The government is putting more money into mental health, but they have their own structures and they tend to be quite behavioural, so they can be very measured in the results. And it's quite restrictive, and you have to go through like their training program. And it was just, I was like, that's really not going to be an option. It's going to be too restrictive for what I want to do. So I was left with researching, well, how do you become a self-employed counsellor? Like, what happens? And I came across all this online coaching and people working online and digital nomads. And I was like, that could be quite fun. Like, then I could be wherever and I could still travel, which I'd never done. I'd gone straight to university and hadn't really thought about it too much. But in the past years, getting more into yoga and things like that, I'd become more interested in Eastern cultures and philosophies, and I was like, oh, it's great to go over there and spend a bit more time, not my 1 or 2 weeks vacation time. So yeah, I gradually started thinking, okay, well, maybe I can work online. And it took quite a while. So for the first couple of years, basically I quit my job and moved from London. Like, just moved back up north. I just didn't see the point in being in London and paying a fortune in rent for this beautiful apartment that I had when I could work from anywhere. And so I started doing a little bit of face-to-face work because I'd done my internship in London in bereavement, and that was face-to-face and I really loved it. But I knew that I wanted to work online, so I just gradually just made the steps. And when one client finished face-to-face, I just didn't replace them, stopped advertising face-to-face, and eventually I was all online. And then it was kind of up to me where I went from there. So I think my first big trip was Sri Lanka a couple of years ago, and I went for a week initially, came home, had made lots of friends and just booked a ticket a month later, and then stayed for like 2.5 months. So it was really amazing. Really amazing to try and work in different time zones, different cultures, again trying to find the right setting to do the work, because it was really important that this wasn't a vacation for me. So I had to make sure that I found places that I wasn't going to be overheard, that people were going to feel comfortable talking to me, which wasn't always easy. It was definitely challenging, but the more you do it, the more you learn at the end of the day.
I really like, well, it took a long time, so I don't like the fact that it took you a while to get there, but I like that it did, because whenever, right now things are different because many of us have been forced into work situations we don't like, but people who dream about being nomads, they think that, oh, it's this hippie lifestyle that at least the preconception is that it's people who kind of know that they want to do it. They just don't give a crap about anything. And they're just going to, you know, go and hang out on the beach. But you had various steps in your career and you kind of figured out what you wanted, which I think is really encouraging to a lot of people who may have feel like, oh, this is not for me, or I may have missed the boat. So it's kind of good to hear.
Yeah, I think definitely there are a lot of people who are like, oh, you're so lucky. I hate when people say that to you. Just because it's like, no, there wasn't luck. It was just, it took a long time, and it was just putting one foot in front of the other and just choosing. And that is the thing. Like, I appreciate that some people do have very challenging circumstances and there's not the opportunity to change. But I think a lot of the time it's just a case of asking ourselves, is this working for me, and what would work better? And then not necessarily needing to leap. Like, this whole process of getting to where I am now, I've been qualified as a counsellor for 6 or 7 years, and it took me 4 years to qualify. So I started my like proper counselling journey in 2010. And so, not to discourage people that it takes a long time, because every step felt really good, because it felt like the right step for me at the time. It wasn't like I was like, oh God, I just wish I was there already, and I need to get there, and I need to get away from here. I knew that I was just taking the next intuitive step, and it never felt huge or scary or big, because I was just taking one step. So I think it's absolutely possible. And yeah, it's quite a challenge sometimes, because a lot of the time when you're traveling, you are working with people or you're around people who are traveling and not working. And so there's a lot of discipline involved there in kind of making sure that, and I think there's a lot of preconceptions as well, including my parents, who were like, oh, you're checking out of society. And now I think they start to realize that it's not, you know, I pay my taxes, I work, I'm very dedicated to my career. I'm just doing it in a different way. And that's possible now. And we've seen that with COVID, like everyone's working online. I think it'd be very interesting to see how that's reintegrated into the corporate model when we all do start going back to work, because people have seen that it can work, not always and not all the time, but it doesn't have to be either or, it can be and. And I think hopefully we've learned a lot about how we can work in a more holistic way.
Yeah, I've heard someone compare this to, we've had about 3 years of societal and digital work-life change in 3 months, which was great because it was accelerated and it showed people that there's a lot more possible than they thought was possible. So maybe you'll have some competition on the beaches. I don't know. You better get down wherever you want to go too fast.
Well, it's kind of nice, because I noticed there was like a couple of months at the beginning where my work really dropped off, which I completely understand because nobody knew what the hell was going on. But now it's really picked up, and I think there was still, even with coaching, and one of the reasons why I started training in coaching was because I knew that it was a lot more fashionable than counselling. It was a lot more accessible. There was less stigma attached to it.
Yeah.
But even with coaching and even with counselling in the UK, there's still a lot of stigma attached. And particularly, a lot of people will think about counselling as, you know, that traditional kind of Freudian lying on a couch in a room. And it's been really nice that this has opened a door, I think, to online therapy, because it's still a relatively new thing, even though I've been doing it for quite a few years. I was doing it the first few years with no guidance at all from my professional body, because they just didn't really have an idea. They were like, yeah, you can do this, but there's no research. We don't know how it works. Like, you'll just have to kind of figure it out. And it was only a few years ago that they actually started putting guidance in place for how to work online. And now everybody has actually started to use it and see, oh, it is possible. Because a lot of people initially, they're like, oh, I don't know how that would work online. I don't know how it would work on video. I think I'd want to see somebody face to face. And there's always going to be people for whom face to face is better and a better option, and that's why I have consultations with people, so that they can see that. But I do think it's definitely opened the door, which I quite like. I quite like the fact that it's a more normal thing now, because I used to get such weird looks when I used to say what I did.
Yeah.
They'd be like, people would just be like, what? Well, how does that work? And I'm like, oh, on a video call, the same as any other video call. It's just a conversation.
I do want to talk about the stigma a little bit, because it's something that's been quite interesting to me. I, as a person, at least now, I don't really embarrass very easily. And I'm always been an open book right now on purpose, because I've realized that sometimes when I share something that I don't really think is wrong, some people might, and they have some sort of shame attached to it. So I'm like, you know what, that's fine. I'll share. If they can relate to it, that's great. And I think it was only a week ago that, a bunch of things happened, and I decided that I posted a little thing on Instagram. I posted a photo of my anti-anxiety meds, and I wrote, like, I'm great. Like, there's nothing bad happening with me. I'm in a really, really great space. So just in case, getting it out there, because when I posted that, I got very, very interesting reactions. I got some people,
I bet.
and there's some that have commented on the post, but many private messages. And some people talked about, oh my gosh, you're so brave, because this is such a, like, people don't like admitting to it. And I'm like, yep, and that's why I posted it. And also,
yeah,
if I break an arm, I go to a doctor. If I'm not feeling well emotionally, I'd also want to fix it, address it. Then there were other people who reached out and shared their own personal stories. And then there was a third group of people that reached out, like extremely, extremely, extremely worried, which I appreciate, because it came from a good spot, but it also reinforced the fact that people think that, okay, if I'm taking anti-anxiety meds, therefore something is seriously wrong, therefore, oh my gosh, we should worry. Whereas maybe it's just chemistry. But yeah, I don't know. Just talk to me about the stigma, and talk to me about how do we make this normal? Like, because it should be, right?
Yeah, it absolutely should be. And I'm really glad that I'm really glad that you shared your own story, because it's something that I have been starting to do, and have been doing. And it's really interesting, again, because traditionally counseling and therapy, your counselor is supposed to be completely neutral. So I was trained, you don't give any personal information. Like, even my own counselor, who I see every week and I've been seeing for like 6 or 7 years, I literally know nothing about her. I know her name. I know she lives in London because I started seeing her when I was in London, and I know how she's trained. Like, I know her qualifications. I literally know nothing else. And that's a very traditional way of working.
Of giving me comfort if I know nothing about you and I'm telling you my biggest secrets.
Well, it's interesting, because I guess that's the way I was also trained. So I was sort of familiar with it, and that was fine. But when you start working online, it's not just a case that if people are looking for mental health support, they'll go look in the Yellow Pages, which is like the directory inquiries book. That you don't do that. People used to do that. I remember when I was first looking for my first counsellor, I looked in the Yellow Pages and I looked for the counsellor nearest to me, and there were 2 counsellors in my area, and I picked
I think
one,
you're aging us a little bit, Emma.
I know, it's really bad, isn't it? But that was what happened.
Everyone's like, what's Yellow Pages?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, the internet was around when I was in my 20s, but it wasn't what it was today. But there's still that thing. So I started working online, and I was like, people want to get to know, they don't need to know everything, but they have to know something about me, because online, and I know you're a marketeer anyway, so you have to do that, like, know, like, trust scenario. Like, people aren't going to buy from you unless they know you, unless they trust you. So I was in this real predicament of, like, how much do I share? Do I share some of my own mental health background? Do I share how I came to counselling? Do I share, what do I do? And, I don't want people to think that I'm unstable myself and therefore unable to help them. And I think what I hopefully have found a balance with is sharing learning things like that after the event. So I'll kind of go through my own crisis and figure it out, and then I'll be like, hey, here's a little sharing learning tip for you. But I think as well, there's such a, I really love people talking about mental health, because I think anybody in a helping profession has probably come to it because they've had their own mental health problems. And mine came in my early 20s. And like I said, my cancer basically saved my life. I was not eating, I was very stressed, I wasn't very happy, and I had anxiety and everything else. And it was amazing. And that's why I eventually, once I got really well trained, I think it's being talked about more. I think the more we can talk about it, and the more we have people in the mainstream talking about it, like for example, the princes, Harry and William in the UK, have talked a lot about their own mental health. And that's been really powerful in making it seem more normal. I also work with a startup here in the UK who are offering mental health support to employees. So they sell to companies, and it's like an app, and you can like ask a therapist a question, or you can sign up for text counselling and things like that. So all these like online stepping stones, I think, are helping, because it used to be either you were fine or you were crazy. And if you were crazy, you were either in a mental hospital or you were seeing a counsellor, and you had to go to a very formal looking doctor's type office and sit down with somebody and like talk about all your stuff. And that feels very far away for a lot of people. And I think a lot of the digital interventions and the steps that people are taking and innovating, whilst there's always going to be a concern of diluting the therapeutic process, there is a lot to be said for putting steps in place between A and B, and doing preventative work and things like that. And you know, for example, I offer a sort of on Telegram, like a video, asynchronous video message service, which isn't supposed to be for people with severe mental health problems, but for someone who's feeling a bit stressed, it's a really nice introduction to what talking about your problems, or talking about what you're struggling with, or just talking about how you're feeling, or just have someone listen as you share a win for that day, can really help. So some people that might be all they need. Some people it might open a door and help them feel a little bit more comfortable with going for that next step of booking a call. You know, some people, video counselling works way better than face to face, because they're able to regulate the contact a little bit, and it feels safer for them to be behind a screen than go to an office and sit in a room with somebody. So I think I wish we could do it faster, but that's just my impatience, and that's something that I have to work on. But I think the more that we can talk about it and normalize it, and the more that we in the therapeutic or coaching world can be innovative and take risks in terms of trying steps in between, not to necessarily say like, oh, we're trying to recreate the therapy service in a text message service. It's not that. It's creating a different stepping stone that's not going to provide the same support at all. But if you can invite somebody into that space and have them feel comfortable with that, maybe it will feel less scary to take the next step. That's kind of what I think. But I think also as well, all the stuff Coach Ari is doing with webinars and things like that makes it so much more accessible. Like just talking about it more openly and doing webinars and talks and having people on and having people talk about their experiences. More talking. that's where I'm going. More talking.
So kind of what I'm hearing is we all have different comfort levels. We all have different preferences. And what's really, really cool is that there are different ways that you could interact with a counselor or a coach or whoever makes sense for you at the time. And that's okay. If you just want to listen, you can listen. If you want to express yourself on your phone through text messages, that's fine. If you want to go see somebody in person, that's fine too. Just do something if you are not feeling great. I mean, for me personally, looking at, I haven't done video counseling. I'm not really big into counseling. Since I discovered coaching, I like that much better because it's future focused, and I'm a fixer. I don't like dwelling on things. It's like, it happened, let's leave it in the past. I want to focus on what can I do to get to where I want to go. But the couple of experiences I've had, you're also a bit disheveled after a counseling session, because it is exploring emotions and things potentially that are painful and triggering. And I imagine it's, for a client, much nicer to be able to just close the computer, and if they want to have a cry, have a cry. If they want to go punch something, go punch something, versus having to walk out of a doctor's office, get on a bus, get home, like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, it just depends on the person, because for some people, going into that space away from the home gives them the travel time to like contain it for themselves and create boundaries before they go back in. For some people, if they're at home, they're expected to, like, it's almost like, well, they've shut their computer and they literally open the door, walk straight back into all the craziness of their family and their life and the dog and whatever. So it just depends on the person. It really does depend on the person, because there are some people I have consults with and I say, well, come on a call with me, see how it feels. If it doesn't work for you, then face-to-face is going to be better. And that just, I don't work face-to-face, so that's then signposting them to somebody else. But for other people, it's great to be at home and just have to, be able to have that space. But it's funny you said that thing about counselling as well, because so many people have that perception of counselling as being like that Freudian, right, tell me all about your childhood. And that, funnily enough, that's not at all how I work. So
you're also a coach, so like, you're a superior being.
Well, no, not that, but it's funny that there's so much, like, again, there's so much that people don't know, and almost, I mean, you've had some experiences, so that's great, and you've got your coaching, so you're fully on the awareness train. But for a lot of people, it's such a mystery, and they maybe don't have anybody to ask. There's nobody in their circle who they know who's had any counseling or therapy or coaching or any kind of personal development. It's just not a thing. And so it just remains a mystery, rather than something that they can ask questions about and get curious about and say, well, actually, maybe I don't feel that great, or just maybe I could feel better, and maybe I could feel better with a coach, or maybe there's a pattern that I see repeating that I could work with a therapist on, or whatever it might be. But I think, there's I wish it was more in the mainstream, which I think is coming. I do think is coming. I don't want to be pessimistic. I think there's a lot.
Well, we can help, right? I'm just thinking, like, maybe there are certain questions that we can reach out to at least our limited audience, and maybe get some anonymous questions, and you and I can get on a call and we can answer them. Because
that'd be fun.
I'm just thinking about, like, counseling, coaching, all that entire spectrum of stuff. It's about improvement, right? It's self-improvement, self-awareness. If I want to get better at sewing, I'm going to sew, and I'm going to ask people who know how to sew to help me with tips. I'm going to watch some videos, and I may fail, but I'm not going to give up because my first dress doesn't look great. You just keep getting better. So, like, I wonder why we don't take the same approach with this. It's like, employers, maybe they have some sort of learning development budget, and they may send you on a course every now and then, but we don't do it in and of ourselves. And even through our work, I don't think there's a recognition yet that just like making this takes practice, getting to a great place here also takes practice and time, and that's okay.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a lifelong thing. I think, I cringe every time a client comes to me, or a potential client comes to me and sort of says, can you fix me? And I'm like, you're not broken. And this is a lifelong journey. Like, yes, we can work together to help move you to a place that feels better, and that's great. But you're never going to get to a point where you're like, tick, right, I'm done with self-improvement now. I've ticked the box. I feel great, and that's it. you know, life is a series of experiences and stimulus and triggers, and that's how we learn. And it's only by becoming more and more and more aware that we learn how to deal with triggers, that we learn what's going on. But unless we completely stop living, we're never going to be able to reach a point where we're done developing. And maybe that's not talked about enough either. I'm not sure. But yeah, I'd love to do like a Q&A and see what people are wondering.
Let's do it. Anyone who's listening to this at any point in time, just, you know how to reach us, because it'll be in the episode notes when you are listening and or watching this. But you can always reach out to Coach Arya, contact@coacharya.com. And I'm also going to give a pitch to our marketplace, because we did launch a tool so people would have access to someone to talk to. It's marketplace.coacharya.com. By the time that this you might be listening, it might change to coachintro.com. It's yeah, I know, we've got so many people participating that we decided to kind of make it its own thing. So coachintro.com is where it will be in the future. But there's many coaches or coaches/counselors like Emma who are offering their services both paid and pro bono. So if you feel like, you know, you're just need some support, or you're not getting to the goals that you have, I mean, that's the kinds of things that these lovely folks can help you with. So please check it out and take the first step towards that lifelong improvement.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know whether I made it sound really daunting then, like, oh, you're never going to get there. You are. You're going to feel way better, and it's going to be fun on the journey. Yeah. It's just a fun, never-ending journey.
Exactly. But life is a journey, right? Like if we had this finite point where we get to and nothing can improve, I don't think there'd be much satisfaction going around. It's like, what's the point of life? Exactly. Emma, this has been lovely. If there's one thing that you can leave our audience with, one kind of action they can take, whether it's, you know, action inside like a thinking thing or an actual physical action to get to a better place with how they are feeling, what would you suggest?
Oh, what a question to drop. Maybe I'm going to share my own little sort of life philosophy, which there's much more to it than this, but it comes down to this, is that every thought or action or the way that I'm feeling, I question myself. If I'm not feeling good, if there's something not working, I will just ask myself, am I seeing this through the eyes of fear, or am I seeing it through the eyes of love? Because perception is everything. And this comes from the teachings of A Course in Miracles, but the premise is kind of universal, that we can sort of see through two eyes. When we perceive something, we can choose how we perceive it. And there's always a way to perceive it with kindness, with compassion, with love, both for ourselves and whatever else. And that might just help shift something if you're struggling with it. It's something I ask myself many, many times a day.
Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Emma. I really, really appreciate you sharing your life journey and a bit about mental health and counseling, and that the journey to being a nomad may actually lead through some corporate gigs. So anyone out there who's also dreaming of living on the beach, you can still do it, no matter how old you are and what you're currently doing. Yeah, definitely. Totally possible. And Emma, hopefully after this, you'll also send me, I don't know, some pictures we can add, or social media where people can see your surfing adventures and your puppers. Well, I want to see the dogs.
Yeah, I can do that for sure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. And for all of you watching and or listening, I will see/hear you here next week with another wonderful Wonder Woman who is making this world better, kinder, and more wonderful each and every day. Thanks so much for watching and listening.
Thanks.